Welcome to Newsnight, where we talk to some of the major stakeholders in Nigeria's journey to growth and development. I am Ladi Akiridoluale. Thanks for joining us. The seeming politicization of highly sensitive issues will not help Nigeria's development. Also, there is a misconception about ranching and herding, while the arguments for restructuring the country are basically flawed. My guest is elder statesman, former Minister of Education, and chairman of the Northern Elders Forum, Professor Ango Abdullahi. Prof, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be on your program.
Mention any topic today, and there is a seeming difference in opinion between various groups.
Yes.
The other day I was listening to someone who said, well, actually, we are under the impression that there are only 250 or so odd ethnic groups in the country, but that there are, in fact, almost 400 ethnic groups in the country, and that each group has its own idea about what Nigeria means and what it should mean.
Yes, sir.
That complicates our politics.
That's true.
And if it does, today, so many things are swirling in the air, and that's what I want your opinion on.
Yeah.
Let's start with the issue of security, and take it from the angle of, in more recent times, the way it began. The issue of clashes between farmers, who are all over the country, and herdsmen, who are also all over the country.
That's right.
Do you think the way they've tried to tackle it, banning open grazing, trying to put up ranches, National Livestock Transformation Plan, and Ruga, being in agriculture yourself,
That's right. Yes.
are these, in your view, politics aside, adequate to tackle what seems to be, by some of the explanations, a fairly long and complex problem?
That's right. This harmony, so-called disharmony between herdsmen and farmers, is a political fabrication, unfortunately. And it is used as a platform for political discourse. And you have just alluded to the fact that, yes, we have so many ethnic groups in the country, and we have been debating the national question and so on, all over the years. And all this is a reflection that there is no cohesive national position in terms of the future of the country. But all the discussions that we have been going through are largely around fault lines of tribe, of religion, of geography, and so on. You cannot give this as an excuse for Nigeria to be in difficulty. India is far more diverse than Nigeria in terms of its ethnic content. Even China is more diverse than Nigeria in terms of its ethnic content and so on. But the difference has been that the political leadership coming from these diversities had not been able to come together and look at the country now, medium, short-term, long-term, and so on, and see how best to deal with the situation. And this is why I give a lot of credit to our first leaders in the First Republic. Dr. Azikiwe from the east, Chief Awolowo from the west, Sardauna, Abubakar, and the rest from other places. Of course, the diversity of tribe had always been there. Diversity in religion had always been there. But what they agreed when they were debating how to make Nigeria one, all Nigerians one, this is where they had some slight differences. So, okay. Yes, in terms of anthropology and so on, perhaps there will be no day when I'll wake up as a Fulani man to feel Yoruba. And somebody else will not feel the same. And that's how it is. And if you look at many countries today, take, for example, the oldest, so-called oldest democracy in the world, Britain, Scotland. Even recently, there was a referendum on secession by Scotland, Ireland, Welsh, and so on. And of recent here is Britain trying to get out of
The European Union.
European Union. Only some years ago, the all-powerful Soviet Union broke up into about 9 or 11 countries, and so on and so forth. So it is really, the answers are usually found in the quality of leadership that is available at any given point in time. So when they were arguing about oneness, Nigerians should be one, and so on and so forth, Sardauna did argue. On the other hand, he said, yes, if we cannot be one, and it is very unlikely this ethnic diversity will melt into one, let's try and work and understand our differences. Once we understand our differences, we should be able to work together. And this is what they did for them to be able to work out how Nigeria should achieve independence from Britain. So this is where we are still having crashes now. In fact, we thought we were going to improve. I thought there should have been an improvement on that philosophy of trying to understand differences in the diverse nature of the Nigerian state. But rather than that, the new brand politics, where politicians always strive to win elections, they use all sorts of fallback positions. They use all these fault lines to Nigerian disadvantage. Because when you go to your village, perhaps you have an opponent not quite from the same village and so on. The emphasis is, I'm your own. I'm your son. I'm the son of the soil. This is what is happening today. And this is what is, when you are talking about settler, indigenship, and so on, you have somebody who had lived on the plateau for the last 100 years, but he is he's a settler, and he shouldn't vie for political position in an election, and so it's the same. So what is happening in terms of most of the crises we're having, especially the one you gave as an example, is politics.
You're Fulani.
Yes.
And you talk about the argument that people are using the various crises and the fault lines as a basis for negotiating, so to speak,
Exactly.
Positions.
Yes.
Now, there are, of course, those who believe that the Fulani in particular,
Yep.
and then if they want to broaden it, the Hausa Fulani,
Yes.
believe that they have the right to rule the whole country. And that any counter-argument is not acceptable.
No,
More recently,
Yeah. Okay.
maybe in support of that argument,
Okay.
you have been quoted as saying that
Oh.
there's nothing that suggests that the North should give up power, and that anybody who is saying so should probably have a rethink.
Yes.
Now, that may also feed into the narrative.
That's right. Well, I will explain that quite easily. You see, this theorem, we said that the Hausa Fulani had taken a position as of right that leadership of this country should be vested in him or in them, is blackmail. Simple. It also is, this is coming from people perhaps who have not even taken any serious, making any serious effort to understand the kind of mix that the North is made up. There is more diversity in northern Nigeria than in any part of Nigeria. We have more than the 500 ethnic groups we are talking about in Nigeria. About 350 to 400 are all here in northern Nigeria. All here in northern Nigeria. I can tell you, for example, Abubakar Tababale was not Fulani, not Hausa. So many of the leaders that have emerged in one way or the other, whether in the military, whether in politics, in whatever, are not Hausas. They are not Fulanis. General Gowon is not Hausa. So many.
But General Buhari is.
General Buhari is, I think,
Fulani?
Yes, I think he's Fulani.
You think? Why
Yes,
do you say you think?
Well, I mean, that's what people say. I don't know Buhari as a person. And I
And
know
you are Fulani.
I am.
And there are many
Yes,
like you who
oh,
are
yes,
Fulani.
oh, yes, oh, yes.
And
So,
that even during the time you mentioned,
so-
Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the real power was the Sadauna, who incidentally was also
but
Fulani.
that was imaginary. That is
Because the
imaginary.
story is told us. You can
Yes,
say it's
but
not
this
true.
is the
The
problem,
story
that
is told us
you
that
don't try to verify
he
your
refused
stories.
to come to Lagos to be prime minister and said
Agree.
instead sent
His argument was very clear. He said, Abubakar, you are likely to fit more in Lagos than I. Because perhaps the people you are going to meet in Lagos are largely enlightened, educated elites that will be representing various parts of Nigeria in Lagos. And you need that kind of class of people in Lagos. So you need also someone with the capacity to handle that situation. I have a major responsibility up north to be able to galvanize these diversities that we have of about 400, 500 ethnic groups in different parts of northern Nigeria. And this is what Sardauna really dug in to do. And this is what Sardauna succeeded in doing. And this is what Sardauna created like a myth. Northernness. Despite these diversities, we reached a situation where northernness became just northernness. Anybody from this part of the country, Tiv, Idoma, Hausa, Kanuri, Nupe, and so on, northerner. And he answers simply because of the quality of leadership that makes it possible for one to believe that, yes, we are a family of northerners despite our historical, tribal, ethnic differences and so on, because of the quality of leadership. So you see, this is what really has been missing, largely. And this is where, up till now, perhaps, we have not achieved this psychology of Nigerian oneness. And in fact, things have started to deteriorate. Because if you took the regions before, and in 1960 there were 3, and in 1963 there were 4. Midwest region was added. The North was there. Of course, the constitution, each region had a constitution. And there was clear responsibility defined by the various constitutions of the regions vis-a-vis the constitutions at the federal level. In fact, most people agree that the federal government was in a much weaker constitutionally position than the regional governments, because the powers were really vested in the regions. And that's why there was exertion. There was a lot of effort at regional development. And the achievements are there for people who care to read history to see in the western region, in the eastern region, and here in the northern region, and so on. But when people thought that the solution to Nigeria's unity must be found in its diversity, meaning that in creating what people refer to ethnic nationalities. That's what eventually led us to the first step of creating 12 states, the country, which General Gowon considered to do, and on and on and on from 3 regions to today 36 federating units. And of course, if you think that the creation of state had brought Nigerians closer together, then you must be making a mistake, because it has created more division now. And Igbo, let's say I'm from Imo State, I'm looking for a job in Abia State today. It's not going to be easy for me to do. Quite difficult to do so on the basis of statism. The same thing here. Somebody from Adama, from Niger, from Kwara, and so on, would walk into any service area and say that I want a job. Being a northerner, you're on. But today, things are different. Even at the level of local governments today, there is this obvious feeling of division between local governments. We want to be independent from neighbors that we used to feed together and so on. And this is all adding up to greater negative diversity as we try to see it in the context of state creation or local government creation and so on, apart from wastage of resources. If I can tell you that if I had to take a decision today, I would revert Nigeria to the 1960 Constitution, or at best 1963, because our experience to date ought to show us that we are running a system that is not efficient, is corruption-ridden, it's not accountable as it was before. Because I want to expatiate on this presidential. This was our first mistake, in my view. There are a few friends of mine who died fighting for a reversal to the parliamentary system of government. May his soul rest in peace. My colleague, my classmate, Ibrahim Tahir, for example. He said, Ango, this system does not belong to underdeveloped societies.
You're referring to the presidential
The
system.
presidential. Because in 1976, when they had this Constitution Review Committee, in fact, the military then did not even allow a discussion on the pros and cons of moving away from parliamentary to a new system, whether it was presidential or something else. It was just decreed that the committee, the Constituent Committee, should go and search for a more suitable presidential system of government. The reasoning behind that, they said power concentrated in the hands of one person and so on, perhaps may lead to faster decisions, by implication faster developments and so on and so forth. Not knowing that this in fact has taken us back. Because in the parliamentary system, accountability is ensured by the fact that nobody becomes a member of parliament, first and foremost, until it's elected from a constituency. It will come to a parliament. In the parliament, the party with the largest number of members would perhaps produce the prime minister. But even the prime minister, in making his recommendations for appointment to ministerial positions, must submit himself to the wish of the overall membership of parliament. And of course, a man who becomes a minister, first and foremost, he has a constituency where voters brought him about. So they are watching. He should know that they are also watching. He's accountable not just to the nomination by the prime minister or the leader of the party, but he was also accountable to the entire membership of the parliament, because at any time some people can raise an issue about his failures, if he fails, and so on, this sort of thing. So accountability is there. But not now. Not now. Because
would this make you, because the way you're speaking, those listening to you and those who have watched others sit in the chair you're sitting today, would say Professor Abdullahi is an advocate of restructuring.
Restructuring could mean a lot of things. I've argued with quite a few of my some of them seniors, Debanjo, whom I criticized in my last interview, and others. I said, yes, we need to restructure because this system is not working. The system is not working.
But you have a quarrel with what is being suggested as the alternative.
No, but what is the alternative?
Well, in their view, the alternative is to, as you point out, go back.
Yes, I mean go back. You see, when you talk about restructuring, particularly as one reads in the newspapers, there are appears to be so many definitions, so many different understandings of what restructuring actually means. I've always argued with my colleagues and friends, and even at that level, say, no, we should first sit down in a very cordial atmosphere from all shades of interest and try to arrive at a definition of what kind of restructuring Nigeria critically requires. And once we can agree on that, then it makes it easy for us to make our case to whoever wants to listen, but more importantly, make our case to Nigerians.
But was that not what the 2014 conference did?
No.
Unfortunately,
no. Unfortunately, no. I refused to attend it.
You were nominated.
I was not with it because it was not properly constituted.
How
it wasn't properly constituted.
How so?
Yes, I'll tell you why. When the promoters went to my leader, the late Namasanin Kano, and I can mention two of them, Professor Nwabuze and senior advocate Asimota. They went to Kano and saw Metamasule and asked him, what does he think about holding a national conference? I said, well, what's wrong with the national conference? Because it affords Nigerians the opportunity to sit down and discuss matters of common concern and interest. But you know, I'm an old man now and I have some disability and so on. Go and find Paul Unongo and Professor Ango Abdullahi and discuss the matter with them. And once they report to me that, yes, the reasons are cogent that this kind of dialogue should take place at the national level, I will go along. So indeed they came. Here in Abuja, we sat down in a hotel, myself, Unongo, and Professor Nwabuze and Osimota and one other person. He said, yes, we need a national conference. I said, sir, why? He said, because the Nigerian state is not stable, it's unbalanced. We still persuaded him to be a little more specific in terms of its imbalance. And unfortunately, he went to an area which, to my mind, shouldn't have come from somebody with his enormous legal background and so on. I said the first thing was that the British had made a mistake. I said, in what way, sir? Said, well, the decision they took on amalgamating the northern and southern parts of their territories. And when they did it in a lopsided manner that gave advantage to northern Nigeria. And that advantage is responsible for the crisis that we're experiencing in Nigeria since that time. Well, we tried to be polite and said, well, this imbalance that you're talking about over these many years, in our view, had been addressed in so many ways. The first person to address it, as northerner, was General Gowon. He split the regions into 12 states. And to have a balance, 6 states in the south and 6 states in the north. No matter how big it was, 6 states in the north, 6 states in the south. Say, yes, but that's not enough. I say, then what else? But in addition, state creation continued. At the same time, local governments were also being created to take care of peculiarities of minorities in different parts of the country. Are all these not good? Or have they not improved this conjecture of northern dominance and so on? He said no. He said the north is still very much the north it was before. Difficult to understand that argument because, I mean, in terms of politics, so, sir, what are you worried about? His argument was that since I was sitting with a friend of mine, a classmate, Paul Unongo, who happens to be a thief from Benue State, then he asked a rhetorical question that, Paul, you consider yourself a northerner? Of course, Paul was angry. So what do you think I am? I'm a thief. And when the British came and carved out northern Nigeria, thief people were put in northern Nigeria. And we're happy to have been in northern Nigeria all these years, even though now we have a Benue state where our tribes together with other Idoma neighbors and so on in one state. But that cannot stop these historical links that we have established with non-thieves, non-Idomas, Fulani, and so on, that we had in the Old North. They say, but that's why the problem is. So then how do you stop that? It's human nature that you relate to people that are either next door or close to you, or we understand certain things in common together. And then it was very clear that we saw the direction things are going. Then we asked him, who is putting this national conference together? So we're trying to persuade the president to do so. That's Jonathan. So, well, when you persuade him and he thinks it's worthwhile, despite the fact that he belongs to a political party and there is a National Assembly and there are representations from different parts of the country in the National Assembly, he still thinks that the difficulties we have to be discussed at a national conference rather at the National Assembly where representation is from all nooks and corners and crannies. Fine, if he feels so. But I'm sure then he will take the necessary steps to make sure that the conference is organized in such a manner that does not really deviate from the collective concerns of everybody. So no, in fact, they came with an idea that the basis of selecting the delegate should be ethnic nationality. So if the Yoruba population is 20 million, they'll be represented by one person against a population of another tribe that is less than 1 million. Democracy, whatever it is, I don't know how you define it. So when we discovered that really there are more issues behind the pressure that is being mounted on government to have this national conference, we decided to opt out of it. And we reported this to our leader. He said, "You are okay, allow it." And when finally it was composed, it was very clear. It was very clear, it was lopsided, it was skewed against certain clearly identified interests. And this is what, up to now, we are contending with. You referred to my interview recently, and where I disagreed with my elder, Chief Adebanjo. He was very specific in this. I was shocked to see him quoted, and there was no denial on that quotation, that Nigeria's crisis today is because of Hausa Fulani Muslims. Now, tag these words: Hausa Fulani Muslims of northern Nigeria. Of course, there are Muslims elsewhere. There are in his area, Western Nigeria, there are Muslims elsewhere, but Hausa Fulani Muslims of northern Nigeria. Can't believe that today there's a leader that would come out with this blatant statement, which is targeted against a section of the country or ethnic groups in the country in the way he did. And that's why I responded the way I did. And my response was deliberate.
But you could also be accused, Prof, of doing more or less the same thing you've accused him of. In the sense that when
I was deliberate about this because I know there will be this reaction. Say, Prof is doing the same thing. I say, yes, I'm doing the same thing my elder is doing, but I hope there will be a time when we'll come and sit down and say, well, we're sorry for what we've done. Together.
But Prof, first, is it true that you said that the whole issue of rotation and allowing people to pick the topmost job in the country and so on does not really sit well with you, and that as far as you are concerned, not the northern Nigeria and tribes within it can hold on to power for 1,000 years if need be?
Yes, I was also deliberately saying that. And also, I could also justify my position on this.
Please do, because
this is
Igbos
what
of Eastern Nigeria have been particular about taking you up on that at this point.
That's right. Now, I was a founding father, not just a member, a founding father of PDP. 10 of us appended our signature in the office of INEC for PDP to become a party. But I should also take you back to the Constitutional Conference of 1980, 1994, Abacha Conference. Because I attended three. I attended the Babangida Conference of 87, I attended the Abacha Conference of 94, 95, and attended the Political Reform Conference
under General Obasanjo.
So one could say that we're aware of all the developments, political development that are taking place. So in 1994 conference, there was a lot of debate about, there was a committee called power sharing. And many of us served in that committee, meaning the essence of power sharing committee was to see in what way we can, in the Constitution, put in provisions that will make sure that power could move around the different contending areas in Nigeria, whether the contending areas were tribal, whether they were geographical, whether they were religious, and so on. That was why it was a very important committee, and many people served on it. When in the end it was agreed that there should be, in the report of the conference, a provision for power to rotate between the north and the south. Go and check the details. You'll find it exactly that. It was part of the report of the Constitution that power should rotate between the north and the south. When eventually the report was submitted to the government, Abacha's government, there was pros and cons in terms of yes and no. The government was supposed to be properly advised whether it is something that this should be kept in the Constitution. And there was very articulate argument by some lawyers, I don't know who they are now and so on, that advised government that this provision should not be put in the Constitution because constitutions are difficult to change. But Nigeria is very hopeful that one day, not too long from now, the Nigerians should not be looking about rotation of power. They should be looking for good leadership, irrespective of which part of the country they come from. So those won. Then the government said, yes, this provision should be used by the parties. If the parties want to put it in their various constitutions, they should do so for them to capture votes from different parts of the country. And as a member of the PDP then, I was in a committee or subcommittees that were dealing with constitution and manifestos of the party. I think I remember one or two people now. I can mention Dr. Shetima, Jerry Gana, and quite a few others. And when we put it, then we put that provision in the Constitution and Manifesto of PDP, that PDP as a party believes that power should be rotating to different parts of the country between the north and the south. And that's how it was put there. And of course, it worked for PDP because it generated a lot of support based on this provision. And this is how you could see that I was part of it. So why is it now that if I'm changing my mind, why am I changing my mind? Now I will go to the areas where I'm changing my mind. When this was done, there was a lot of debate as to even where would it start. Quite a number of activist friends and so on, like Abubakar Rimi, may his soul rest in peace, and quite a number of other people. First, they didn't agree with the principle, but we have put it there. Now it will happen, they say, no, they are going to contest. Even if we agree that somebody should come from the southern part of the country, they are also going to contest the election. I said, fair enough. The Constitution allows you, the Constitution of the country supersedes the Constitution of the party. So we couldn't stop them from contesting the election. But when eventually the party agreed that the South will produce the president, and then it was left between one of my leaders, Alex Ekweme was the leader of G34. I was a member of G18 and then later G34. He was our leader, and I was hoping that perhaps he would pick it. But eventually he didn't. General Obasanjo picked the nomination. And he won the election. I was sitting with him when he declared for president in Ota. You could see at that time, of course, Obasanjo was not in active politics. He couldn't have been seen in the mainstream of Western Nigerian progressive politics and so on. The ones in front were Elijah Kande, Chief Olufalaye, and the rest of them. But we stood behind Obasanjo under that provision of power rotation. And he eventually picked the ticket at the convention in Jos and won the election under this rotational provision. He came, he became president. He served his first 4 years. He said, well, the Constitution allows him to run another 4 years. After a few arguments and so on, it was agreed. He ran the second term, won the election, became president. So after his 8 years, under the PDP principle, under the PDP constitution, it was natural that the North will take over. Now this is where some of these things began to go sour. After a few katakata, Umaru Yar'Adua became the president, and the vice president came from the South-South. Umaru Yar'Adua died 3 years in office. 3 years in office. And of course, we were expecting, under the spirit of that clause, the North will still be given the chance to provide a candidate in 2011. But then that's when all these things began to go haywire. Some people said no. And where are the people who are saying no at that time? They are still the ones not are worried that will say, yes, we are going to true definition of democracy. One man, one vote. If you win an election on the basis of one vote, be it. But otherwise, if you don't agree, and in fact, I must say here, Jonathan didn't help matters, because when they were arguing for him to give up the position because this is a northern chance, he said he didn't know where that agreement came from. He didn't sign any agreement about rotation. And some of us were very disappointed because those of us who negotiated all this with their leaders, particularly with their elder Edwin Clark and others, knew what was happening. And when they came out bluntly to say that they didn't know anything about rotation, and they said, so, okay, be it. So that's what we're now reminding them, that there's no such thing as rotation. And in any case, it is only PDP that had this in its constitution and manifesto.
The APC doesn't.
It doesn't have. So anybody's game. Depends on what you are able to do to capture votes wherever you can find them.
But Prof, don't you think that that will create some measure of, may I use the word instability, in the sense that from even the history you've given, with all the political calculations, with the arguments back and forth, if we take it from what came out of the Abacha conference, which was where we came up with the 6 geopolitical zones.
No, in fact, if you like to talk on that one, the geopolitical zones are not part of our constitution. They are not.
So, no, they're not in the Constitution, but
They are not in the Constitution. But it was thought that, I must say, this is out of the effort of our late leader, Vice President Ekweme, because he led the committee that reviewed the report of the Constitutional Conference. And I think he argued convincingly to other members of the review committee that eventually agreed that there should be geopolitical zones. In fact, really, if one goes into the details of what transpired in that constitutional conference, there were even suggestions that this country should create confederates. And of course, it was defeated. And so perhaps to me, some people interpret these geopolitical zones as substitute of what was lost in terms of confederal arrangement.
But the point I was going to make, Prof, is that if you look at it, with all those negotiations and so on, I mean, dating back from when the preparation began under General Babangida.
No.
And eventually when these geopolitical zones, as you say, were argued successfully for by the late Dr. Ekweme, virtually every zone, every one of the zones amongst the 6, except for one, have been able to negotiate their way to the presidency. The Southwest has, even though you talk about it now that Dr. Goodluck Jonathan broke the agreement, both in the spirit and in the letter of it.
Yeah.
But that resulted in the South-South getting its turn, and then in the North as well. And even if one were to narrow it down to just North and South, it's in the North now.
Yeah.
It's come down to the South twice. In the South, there are 3 geopolitical zones. The only zone that hasn't gotten it is the Southeast. Now, if elders like you in the North take the position you get...
No, they haven't done their homework.
But if you take the position you take... No matter how much homework they do, they're not likely to get it, because if you say democracy is a game of numbers.
Which means that they still have failed in their homework. Because the fact that today I said no doesn't mean that tomorrow I will not say yes. It all depends on the arguments that have been put forward. Because what triggered this is this unexpected, if you like, position taken out of the blues that certain sections of the country should in fact be excluded from Nigeria. Because that's what, go and read that interview. He said that, yes, if the North will not mend, if these Hausa Fulani Muslims will not mend their ways, the Southwest, the Southeast, the South-South, and what he described as the radical middle belt should come together, meaning, implying that we should exclude these Hausa Fulani Muslims in the extreme north. This is the meaning of this. And in fact, this also takes us back to the days when Oka's coup clearly came out and said that some sections of Nigeria had been expelled. So we still believe that perhaps that agenda must be working in the minds of some people. And this certainly will not be acceptable.
Professor Abdullahi, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for
You're
speaking
welcome.
with us.
You're welcome.
That's Newsnight today. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.